Next is we'll see about how do we go to the VBA. Fine. So what is the use of VBA?
Okay. Yes.
So generally, when I talk about VBA, so VBA stands for Visual Basic for Application. So I think you would have heard about a programming language called as Visual Basic 6. Yeah. Yeah. See, there was a very, very popular language that was released in 1998, late 90s. Okay. And it was one of the very, very popular programming language, which was mainly used for the desktop application, which was actually having all the graphical application. So it was visual in programming. So it was very popular because of its simplicity and things. And is also a language from the Microsoft. Now, VBA is a language which is used for the applications. You know, Microsoft has various applications. We have Word, we have Excel, we have PowerPoint, okay, Outlook, and all those things, even Access, Microsoft Access database, and all those things. So you want to customize this, any of this particular existing application. So we need to have some kind of programming language with the help of which you can customize it. Okay. So now, so VBA is used with all of the Microsoft applications. So it can be used with Word, it can be used with Excel, PowerPoint, Access, any this one. Fine. So, but here we will be specifically working, learning how to use a VBA for Excel.
Okay.
Okay. So when I talk about Excel, so what is an Excel? So Excel is a spreadsheet where you have the data into rows and columns. Okay, so when I say you have the data into row and column, so how do you work on this particular row and columns? So that is what we will be looking into. So to just get the introduction of this particular VBA, so it is something like this. So we'll learn about introduction to VBA. So we'll try to understand what exactly is VBA. We'll try to understand, get familiar with the editor. Okay, so where exactly you write the code, where we have the module, where we write the classes, where we need to declare the variables. We'll try to understand those particular editor, and then we'll try to understand the basic programming concepts of VBA. And then forward going, we'll look into the syntaxes and semantics of writing a VBA code. And then, as usual, we'll get into the programming thing. So we'll try to understand in any programming language. So we mainly make use of what we call it as variables, data types, and constants, and all this thing. So we'll just make use of this particular thing. Fine.
Okay.
So to get into, so generally when I talk about VBA, so VBA stands for Visual Basic for Application. So generally it's a programming language to create all the macros within Excel. Okay. So you want to create macros, or you want to customize the macros, or you want to manually create a macros. Okay. What we did was a recording of a macro. Fine. Here you can manually create a macro which is going to do some kind of set of operations on your Excel data.
Okay.
Although most of the people use VBA for the macro development, VBA is actually much more powerful than this macro language. VBA sits between a Visual Basic and a VB script. So there is something called as a Visual Basic, and do also have something called as a VB script. So when I talk about a Visual Basic, so Visual Basic is one of the very popular programming language I can just talk about. Okay, so it was released somewhere in the late 90s, and it was very, very popular language. So it was for mainly Visual Basic used for creating a your own standalone application. Okay, standalone application is the application when you create, it can run on its own. It can run its own interface. Fine. Yeah. And VB script, when you talk about it, is more like a JavaScript. Okay, it was mainly a client-side scripting language which is used for web pages. So where you want some client-side code to be written, so they used a VB script. Fine. So that means I can say VB script is mainly used for the web applications. Visual Basic is used for a desktop applications and all these things. Something like, you know, applets you use in Java, no? So something like that kind of applications, Visual Basic was being used. But when you talk about a VBA, so I can say VBA, it uses all the programming syntaxes from the Visual Basic language, but it is going to interact with your Excel, and it is going to run within your Excel application, a Microsoft Excel application. Okay, so when I say since it is going to run inside an Excel application, so it has to interact with your Excel. See, in your Excel, we have an Excel file which is called as workbook, which contains a collection of worksheets. Each worksheet consists of cells, vertical rows, columns. We have a cell, we have a range of cells, how do we interact with this particular cell? I want to write something into a cell, or I want to read some data from the cell, or I want to modify formats that contains in the cell or something. Okay, so in that case, okay, we will be using this language, so which gives me an APIs, the interfaces to interact with my Excel. Got it?
Excuse me,
Yeah.
1 second. Yeah.
Okay. Fine. So here, what happens is in the VBA provides large portion of the language element that VB uses. That is including we have something called as a forms. Forms are mainly used for the graphical user interface. So here in Excel, you want to take some input from the user. So you want to take some input from the user. We can take the help of the form through which we can take the input from the user. We can define your own custom controls. Okay, so there is a concept called as objects, that is classes and objects concepts here. This is
Yeah.
not a pure object oriented programming, but still here also we have the concept of classes and objects.
Oh,
Okay, so properties and methods, what is defined in the classes. So we'll try to access the members of that class using the instance of the class, that is generally your object. And we'll also see what exactly is a module. Module is a place where you actually write your subroutines, your procedures, or your functions. That is nothing but your macros. Fine.
okay.
uh, Excel VBA allows you to automate various activities that you do in Excel. We use Excel to analyze the data, create reports, prepare charts and presentations. Okay, do calculation, understand the information. When we are doing all these things, we spend quite some time repeating the same steps again and again. So that means, like, you want to do some particular set of tasks, like, you want to retrieve the data, you want to, after you retrieve the data, you want to consolidate the data, you apply some kind of summarizations on that, then create some kind of a charts, and then you need to forward it to the managers or the different authorities and all these things. So in that case, you spend a lot of time in doing this, and not that. So sometimes, when you're creating a report, so every time you need to do the same report again and again and again. So that becomes a very tedious work, doing the same job again and again. So in that case, we take the help of this kind of automating thing. So that I say, okay, fine. On a single click, okay, it has to do all these things. So that is, we already know, okay, it has to retrieve the data from here. It has to do this consolidation. It has to filter this particular data, pull the data, create a report. So I just customize this on a single click. We say all this has to be executed. Fine. Yeah, we may prepare an email, some type of report every week with the different data. Okay, so that is where by using Excel, VBA can cut down the time we spend repeating the same steps and improve our productivity. Okay, fine. Okay, what is VBA? Generally, VBA stands for Visual Basic for Application. Just like language, like, we have a language for communication. So it is a language, okay, with the help of which I can communicate with Excel. Okay, so Excel understands this particular VBA language, so we are using this language to talk to VBA. Okay, so how easy it is? It's very easy. So the commands, whatever you write, it is written in a plain English commands. For example, the following command says hello. So you want to just say hello, we just use a message box as a predefined method to display a message box. And what is the message you want? Just give it as a string. So that is going to print a message box. Fine.
Okay.
Okay. Fine. We'll just try to write a simple code in a macro, and we'll try to call that particular macros. Fine. So we'll just say, how do we record a macro, or how do we create your own custom macro? Okay. So you want to work
Okay.
with a macro. So first thing, what I need to do is I just need to call this particular tab, the developer tab. I need to include this developer tag. So you can see here. So there is a developer tab. So you can see by default, it is not there in Excel, because maximum people who work Excel, they are not the developers.
Correct.
Okay, they are the people who do some kind of analysis and all this thing. So there are some set of people, they want to do some kind of enhance, or they want to automate your Excel activities, whatever they do. Okay, again, that can be done with the help of the macros, but they want to more customize it. Okay, then only they go to the developers. So by default, this developer tab is not there. So in my case, it is there because I have included when I was explaining to the previous batch students. Okay, so generally it is like this. So customize ribbon, your developer tab, you can see it is not
Okay.
there. Now, if since the developer tab is not there, since I want to work in Excel as a developer, so I need to include this particular developer tab. If I have
Okay.
to include this developer tab, so how will I get it? So to get this, what I do, I just get into the file, okay, and then I just say new,
Okay.
okay, sorry, file. So I just go to this options,
Options.
okay. In the options, I'll go to the customize ribbon.
Okay.
So when you hit on this particular customize ribbon, so we have this particular option here. What do you call it as? You can see here,
Okay.
developer
Underneath
tab
that.
is there under the view and things. Yeah. So which is
Okay.
unchecked. By default, it will be unchecked. You can just check
Okay.
this. When you check it and say OK, so you can see you get this particular developer tab. Now it is there. Okay. Since now the developer tab is there, so when I hit on this particular developer tab, so you can see we have this option. So okay, this is mainly for the coders. Yeah, the people who
Okay.
write the code. So you can even record a macro through the developer. Okay,
Okay.
so this is going to view the macros. Okay, this is taking to the security settings of the macros, and this particular thing, so which I'm just circling it in the blue.
Okay.
Okay, this is mainly used to get into my Visual Basic editor, VBA editor, so
Editor.
code editor. Okay, to get
Okay.
into the code editor, I'll just use this. So what I
Okay.
do is, if I want to get into the code window, so what I do is, so as soon as I hit on this particular Visual Basic, so you can see this will take me to the code window. So where I can see the codes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so and you can see in this code editor, I have again an Excel button here. So this will take me to the Excel.
Okay.
Okay, so what happens here is we'll have two files. One is your coding file and your Excel file. So you can toggle between. So when you save the file, it will be saved as one single file.
Okay.
Okay, but
Okay.
codes will be saved separately. The VBA program will be saved separately, and this will be saved separately. But for us, it is going to be a one single file.
Okay.
When you open, or we are going to give it as one single file name and save it. So generally what happens is, how do you save an Excel file? We save with an extension as XLSX.
Yeah.
Fine. So whereas in the case of VBA, if you have written some code there, so the file has to be saved as macro enabled workbook. So which will be the extension as XLSM.
XLS M.
M. So that will be the extension. So that means this is going to be your Excel file as well as a macro code together. Okay, I'll show you. I'll save it and I'll show you. So, and you can see when you hit on this, this will take me to the window where I can see this particular Excel content. I can get into code. I can get into this one. I can just toggle it and I can view it.
Yeah. Okay.
Fine.
And and in folder, like when we would have saved it in folder, it will be a single file Excel
Yes.
sheet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now what I will
So we
do.
can't navigate through folders into these macros, correct? We have to
Uh,
open our
we have to
Excel
open an Excel
window.
file because the VBA will be written inside Excel. So you cannot
Okay.
open the code file in a different editor, a notepad or any editor,
Mm-hmm.
just like your JavaScript file.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can open in a notepad editor or
Yeah.
any editor, you can open it. But
Yeah.
if you all want to open this particular VBA script, you need to have an Excel and you can open only within Excel. Okay, fine. So now what I'll do is I'll just go to the Visual Basic editor. Just I want to write some code. So now before getting into that, so just getting familiar to this, this is my IDE. You know what is an IDE? Okay, so integrated development environment. So it is the mainly environment which is used by the developers. Fine. So now in this, okay, what we have is I want to write a code. Okay. So before I write the code, we have something called as a project explorer. You can see here, we have a project explorer.
So
A project explorer. You can see. Hello. Okay. So what I did here is, so just to get this, I hit on this particular thing called as a project explorer. Okay. So when I hit on this project explorer, so you can see here, we have this particular thing here called as window a project explorer. So here, when you look into this particular project explorer, so what happens is, so we have this particular 4 sheets. So that means when you get into your Excel file, so you can see we have 4 sheets. So all 4 sheets are there. Okay. And below that, there is something called as a module. Fine. So now if you want to write the code, so if you want to write the code, what we'll do is we'll be writing the code in this particular module. So what I'll do is I'll just double click on this module.
Okay. So we write a code in module.
Yeah, we write the code in the module. See, we can even write the code in the worksheet and the workbook. So there we make use of the events. Events are like, some codes you want to execute it automatically based on some user interactions. Okay,
Okay.
so when you move from one cell to another cell, you want some code to be executed or something, so that we use the event. So I'll be coming to that particular event later in the session. So first we'll see how do you write some simple codes. Fine. So for that, what I will do is I'll just use this particular module. When I double click on this particular module, so you can see you get a white window where you can write this particular code.
Okay.
Okay. Fine. So if you want, I can just. Okay, so your module will be something, since module was already there, we have recorded this code is there. If you want to add an additional module, you can add it. So if you want to include a module, so what we do is we get into the insert tab. In the insert tab, we have this module, and when I hit on this particular module, you can see a new module window gets added. So this is a place where you actually write the code. Fine.
Okay.
So that means whatever the code you write here, I can call it across the whole workbook. Okay, so let me write a simple code just to say hello. Okay, so I just want to write a macro just to say hello. So macros will be always written using a procedure. Okay, a procedure is what? It's like a function. A function returns a value, procedure doesn't return a value. So that means I can say procedure is a block of code. Okay, it's a named block of code, so that once you have written, you can keep calling this again and again. So whenever you call, that particular block of code gets executed. Fine. So I'll just say I see some my macro. I'll just say name of this one, macro. So now what I want to do in this macro. Okay, first thing is I just want to say hello. Okay, I want to display a message box, say hello. So you want to display a message box, what I do is we have this built-in method here called as message box. And what is the message that you want? I just want this hello as a message.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, I've created a macro. Name of the macro is says my macro, and what it is trying to do, it is trying to display a message called as hello. Okay, so now how do we?
That sub indicates it's a procedure.
Sub indicates as a procedure. So macros will be written always like a procedures.
Okay. And case sensitive, is it case sensitive?
VBA is not a case sensitive. All the
Okay.
Microsoft languages are not case sensitive. The same thing here. VBA is not a case sensitive language.
Okay.
Okay, you can give it an upper lower case, doesn't matter. Okay,
Okay.
so now how do we call this particular macro? So if we want to call this particular macro, so what we can do is yeah, I can do one thing is I can just get into my Excel. Okay,
Okay.
so and there you can see when I go to the views macros. Okay,
Yeah.
we used to see the macros. You can see there is a macro called as view macro. I can select
Okay.
this and say run. That is my macro. Select it and run. It will be executed. Say hello.
Okay.
Okay, or
Okay.
you want to assign a shortcut key or icon or something as usual. So I can just go the same procedure. I can just go to the customize quick access toolbar. So I'll just say more commands. There I'll just go to this particular macros, and the name of the macro what I gave was my macro.
My macro.
Where is it? You can see. Yeah, it's here. Okay, so I just select this, say add it. So you want to modify, what is the thing that we can give for this? Okay, I'll just give a kind of hourglass. Okay, I just say okay, cool. So whenever hit on this, it executes. Or the same way, like you want to call it in under this particular things, yes. So I can just go to the file options, customize the ribbon. So I'll just go to the macros. So what is the macro we recorded, which was told as my macro, and I just wanted to include in this. I just select this, say add. Exactly. Say okay. So you can see there is the, so now I hit on this, it'll execute this. Okay,
So it's
fine.
message box alert kind,
Yeah.
correct?
It's a message box. Yeah. So I'm trying to just display a message box says hello here. That is what I have done. A first recording, a simple recording that I have done. Okay. That's it. Okay. So next thing is, so I've just done a simple macro. So now what I want to do is, instead of displaying a message box, I want to write into something into my cell, into my Excel. Okay. So what is that we do? Okay. In that case, what is that we do? I just go to the home. I just go to the Visual Basic editor, and then I say, I want to write something into a cell. So let me record a new macro. I'll just say it as sub. What is the name of the macro? I'll just say,
Okay, we can continue it in the same module.
yeah, same module we can have it.
Okay.
I say, my macro 2. Okay, I think fine. Sub is the start of the procedure, and sub is the end of the procedure. Just like in your Java and all, you use the brackets, no flower braces. Okay, we use the flower braces to say this is the start of the block, and then we say this is the end of the block, and we write the code in between this. Is it? So now here
Yeah.
the start will have a word, English word, and end also will have an English word, and it says ends will generally say end if, end sub.
Okay.
Okay, so if it is a function, we say function. Closing of that will be end function. For if it is a if and logical condition, then the if will have a closing with end if. So they'll have a clear English words. So I can say this is more of a English language. Okay, and things. So okay. So here I just want to write something into my Excel. So if I want to write into my Excel, okay. So how will I write it? See, in Excel, we write the data into the cells. Okay, the cell is also called as a range. Okay, a range is nothing but a group of cells. Now I want to write something in this particular cell, say A1, or I say B2. I want to write in this particular cell. So what is the name of this cell? It is B2. So what I will
Yeah.
do is I'll just call it like this. I just say range of. Okay, so I'm referring to a cell. I just say what is the cell? I just say I want to refer to B2. Okay, so in this cell I want to write a value to this. So that means range is a object of the class. Fine. B2 is like a constructor value for that. Okay, telling that which cell it has to write. And value is a property in that particular class, is what value you want to write in that. So that means for a cell B2, I want to write some value. So what is that value that you want to write? I just say, maybe say hello itself. If it is a string, we include it in the double quotes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
String.
so now what I do is, if I want to run this macro again through the VBA, I can just see I have two methods, macros here. One is my macro, another is my macro 2. If I want my macro 2 to be executed, I just select this and then I run this macro.
Can you say that again, sir?
Yeah, see what happens is, if I want to run this macro, I can keep the
Yeah.
cursor here and then run. It'll invoke this macro.
Okay.
But if you want to run this one, you can
Yeah.
call it like this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so irrespective
So
wherever a cursor is, it goes to range 2 and then it runs. Yeah.
okay. Once if I try to execute this from Excel sheet, then both the macros will get executed. Yes.
Yeah, that means no. See, this is a separate macro. This is a separate macro. So we have
Yeah.
assigned this macro. Now the same way you want to assign here also, you can assign it. So I want to
Okay.
assign this. I just say more commands. So they say which is the macro that you want to assign. I say macro. What is it? My macro 2. This. I just say.
So it's not like it will like goes from one line to another. It goes macro wise,
Macro wise.
procedure wise.
Procedure wise, yes, yes, yes. So now what happens is,
Okay.
yeah. So when I hit on this one, it just says hello. If I hit on this, it will invoke message box.
Okay.
So this is like an IDE what we saw, okay, which has what to say, Project Explorer. It has a code window, that is a module. We write the code, and you can see it shows a list of all the project, that is the open workbook with all the worksheets and the modules what you write. Fine. So now we'll see about concept of variables. Okay. So what is a variable? Generally, when I talk about variables, variables are nothing but it's a named memory locations. Yeah. So that means something like you have a memory. In the memory, okay, here have some, it's like a container, okay, and that container will have a name, okay. So it can be v name, okay, for storing the name of the person or something, or it can be um, I itself, okay, any name, okay, which will be given, okay. So it is a named memory location, will have a value, and will also have a specific data type, says what type of data it is going to store. Fine. Now it says a variable is a value that you ask the computer to temporarily store in its memory. So that means, so generally we use a variable is like a container for storing some information. Fine. So the variables will also have a data type, says what type of data it is going to store.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. And variable also is a temporary, that means it is there only for a temporary period of time. I just say v name is equal to Sam, okay, and if I try to print the v name, it is going to print Sam. But later, if after Sam I say v name is equal to Tom, and then if I try to print this, so it will obviously the old value is gone, it takes a new value. Whenever you assign a new value, the old value automatically goes off. Or when the program stops, or when you have closed the program and you start up again, so you need to assign it again. Okay, so it is there only for a temporary period of time.
Okay.
Okay. Microsoft Visual Basic allows you to directly use any name for the variable as you see it fit. So that means the naming convention for the variables, you can give any name, but one thing is the name should not start with the numbers. It should not contain special characters like space and slash. Okay, so underscore will be allowed. Okay, so similar kind of naming conventions what we use with other programming language here also, but we can use it. Letting the computer know is referred as declaring. So first, if you're using a variable, first thing what I need to do is I need to declare the variable. So first I need to let the computer know that, okay, I have a variable. Okay, that is, we are going to define a variable with a name and the data types. Fine, to declare a variable. And then, okay, that is for declaring a variable in Visual Basic. So this is the syntax. That means you declare a variable using a dim keyword. Fine. The syntax for declaring a variable in VBA is, so we say dim name of the variable as data type.
Okay.
Okay. Generally, like, what happens is, if you're in C language or Java language, if you want to declare a variable of type integer, int I.
Int.
So that means I is a variable of type int. But the same thing, if I'm writing it in VBA, then I need to say dim I as integer. So we don't use int here, we say is integer. But apart from that, I need to use this reserved word also, dim as anything. So dim, the name of the variable, as followed with your data types.
Okay.
Okay, so that is how we declare the variable. So that means, like, I said I want to declare a variable of type integer. So I as integer, I just say dim I as integer. So this is how you declare. So that means here, so I is a variable of data type integer.
Okay.
Okay. So now we have many data types in VBA. So we'll look into what the data types are. So what is a data type? So data type says what type of value that variable can hold. Fine.
Hold.
Yeah. So now these are some of the data types what is supported in your VBA. Okay. So we have a data type called as integer. So integer is 2-byte integer here. So in Java it is how much? 4 bytes, no?
Yeah. Yeah. 4 and long will be 8.
8 bytes. So here integer is 2 bytes. So that means the storage capacity also is limited. Like, it's 2 to the power of 8 into 2. That is 2 to the power of 16.
Okay.
That is together is 65,536, which is divided into half. and since it stores both positive and negative, so if I declare a variable of type integer, it can store the values within a range of this 32,768 to 32,767, including 0. Okay. Okay. So when you say unsigned int, it is going to be only positive. Otherwise, it is going to be both positive and negative. Fine, something like that. Yeah. Long int is like your integer in Java. Okay, which occupies 4 bytes and it has the capacity of storing a integer or variable. 4 bytes integer values. Single is 4 bytes, a double is 8 bytes. Okay, it's like a long int. Okay, but double can store even a decimal values also. Currency for mainly for storing the currencies. Okay, for the currency format, thousand separators and all these things. Date for storing the valid dates. So valid dates in the form, the data has to be in the form of a day, month, years. Okay, those kind of formats. Okay. um yeah, see here what happens is some languages, I think in C language and all these things, when you declare a variable and if you don't assign a default value, it takes some kind of a junk value, is it? Here it
Yes.
takes a default value, even though you are declared variable but you have not assigned the value to that particular variable, it takes some default values. So that default values depends based on the type of data. So when you look into all your numeric types, they have a default value as 0. If it is a date, it is something like the 000, that is midnight 12 o'clock. Fine. String, okay, it will not have any default data. Object will not have anything. So boolean is for storing boolean and true and false. By default, it is going to be false. Variant data types is there. So generally this is used when you want to have a container, but I don't know what data it is going to receive. So I want a container to hold any type of data. Either it might be integer, number, double, it can be long objects or any this one. So in that case, but I want to declare a variable. So in that case, you can just declare a
Okay.
variable as variant, and this will decide the data type based on the type of value that you have assigned. Okay.
Okay.
A decimal for storing a long decimal values. Byte is the shortest integer, so which occupies 1 byte of memory. So this is mainly used when you want to store very small data. So within a range of 0 to 255. Something like, if I'm storing the age of a person, so age maximum is what? Say it says 100, 120 or max, is it? So in that case, if I'm using an integer, we'll be using a 2 byte, we'll be wasting 2 bytes of space. If you use in long integer, 4 bytes or 8 bytes of space. But if you use a byte, it will just occupy 1 byte of memory for storing that same value. Okay, mainly like, you want to store the marks of a student. Okay, or like say this, we can use this. Yep. So these are some of the data types what is supported in your VBA. Okay, fine. We'll see an example. How do you use make use of this data types and write a program? So just let us write a simple program here. So let me get back into my VBA code. Okay, fine. Let us do one thing. Let us write a program which will do an addition of two numbers. Okay, so let me open both side by side. So I just say sub. I say it's a macro which is going to do an addition. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to declare a variable. So two variables to read two inputs and a third variable to store the result. So I'll just say dim num1 as integer. So that means num1 is a variable of type integer. I say dim num2 as integer. True. I say dim result as, I can say double. It can store a bigger value. Okay, now I want to store the value into num1 and num2. So before that, I'll just create a kind of interface here. I'll just say enter first number. So let me have a kind of interface here, and I say enter okay, enter the first number. I say enter the second number. So I have some numbers over here, so it has to do the addition of these numbers. Fine. So now this what is the name of this particular cell? B2. I want this B2 variable to be stored into num1. Okay, and I want this cell B3 value to be stored into num2. Okay, some of this has to be stored in the result, which has to be displayed over here. I want the result to be displayed here. Okay, I just say
Sir, I'm sorry, there was a network issue. I couldn't.
okay, okay, fine. See what I've done. Okay, okay, no problem. What I've done here is, so I just have created a kind of interface. So where I just told, enter the first number and second number. This is the first number and this is the second number. What I want is the first number, I want this to be stored into this variable, say num1. And I want this data to be stored into this particular variable, say num2. Okay, so I want to read this data from the Excel and store into this variable, and the result has to be displayed on this particular cell. So what is this cell? It is B5. Okay, so let me write the program for this. So I'll just say, if I want to assign the value to the variable, I just say variable is equal to, since, okay, see, if I give like this is going to be more of a static value. Okay, so if I say num2 is equal to say 20, and then I say result is equal to num1 plus num2, and I want the result to be printed on, so that is range of B5. So B5 is this particular cell, dot value is equal to result. So B5 is this cell. So now what happens when I run this, it will always execute 43 plus 20, that is 63. So it is not taking the values of this. So this is going to be a static value. And I say whenever I want to calculate with the different values, new values, I always need to go here and rectify, change this. So I say, no, I want to read the data from here, and based on this data, it has to give the result. So what I will do here, I'll read the values from that cell. Say range of A1 dot value. So here instead of 20, I say range of, sorry, it is not A1, it is B1, no? So yeah. B3, yeah, B2 and B3 dot value. So this is B2. I just say it as.
Okay, dot value.
Yeah, dot value. Fine. So that means value is what it contains. So you want to change the color, we say font dot color will change the font color. Interior dot color will change the background color. So something like that. Okay. So now if I try to run this particular program, so you can see what happens. So it is getting as 99, so which is nothing but the sum of these two.
Okay.
If I just modify the data here, so if I try to run this particular macro, it is 6. Yep, summing up this and showing the result.
Okay.
Okay, so this is how we are making use of the variables. That is, we have declared a variable. So this is like we have declared a variable of type integer and double respectively. And here I'm assigning the value into the variable. This is like setting. For assigning the value, it is right to left. So right hand side, we say, okay, we are pulling the data from our Excel. So one of the cell of the Excel, B2 cell. Okay, and what is the data it contains? I'm trying to read that and pushing into this particular variable number. The same way, this data, so I'm trying to read this particular things and pushing into this num2, and doing this particular value of sum of num1 and num2, which is stored into this variable, and that I'm trying to display into this particular range of B5, which is nothing but this. Okay, so that is how we talk about this particular.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
See, fine. So just to recap of what we have done till now. So we have seen how do we record a macro, how do we save the macro, and how do we invoke a macro. So for calling a macro, we have a different interface. Either you can call with the help of the shortcut key, or you can call with an icon from your QAT. That means we can assign an icon on your quick access toolbar and you can call through the QAT, or you can have your own tab on your ribbon and you can have your own custom button, and it can be macro can be assigned to this and you can invoke it, or you can even call from this particular view macros, select a respective macro, and then you can execute. We have the different ways to call this particular macro. So now the purpose of the macro was, so instead of writing this doing multiple activities, so we just record it or pre-code those particular activities and we just call it whenever is needed. So that is the purpose of this particular macro. The third thing
Okay.
is, so once you have created, we now generally when you record a macro, a code gets generated, and that code is nothing but your VBA code. Okay,
Mm.
so now we are learning this particular VBA code so that tomorrow we can customize this particular macro. So we can customize this particular macro. So we are learning this particular VBA code. So now in the VBA code, what we have tried to understood, we have understood like getting familiar. How do we toggle between your Excel to VBA? Before that, we have seen how do we include the developer tab into your Excel.
Yeah.
Once you have included developer tab, how do we go from Excel to VBA and VBA to Excel? So toggling between that. So that was these two things. So when you hit on this, it'll take me to the code window. And when you hit on this one, this will take me to the Excel window. Fine. And within this particular VBA, we have understood the IDE. So there is a project explorer, which shows list of worksheets, list of all the files, what is open, and we write the code inside the module. So include a module, we just go to the insert module. So, and we write the code in that. And when you're writing the code, that is the macros. So that is written in the sub and end sub. Within this particular subroutine, the macros are being written. So in a single module, I can have multiple macros. And then we just went to the understanding about the different data types, what is there in this particular macro. So what is a variables? So we saw variables are named memory locations, and the variable will have a specific data types. So we understood these are some of the data types, what is there in VBA. And then we just try to understand the code of this particular, how do we actually write this particular code in the VBA. Fine.
Okay.
So
Yes.
which is making use of this particular variables. So the syntax for defining a variable is something like this. We use a dim keyword followed with the name of the variable as, and followed with your data types. And for assigning the values, so we use this, okay, will be assigned to this using a equal to operator. And this is the
Okay.
echoing back the value of the variable, we are pushing back into this. So that means here we are trying to
Okay.
read the data from the Excel into my macro variables and doing some kind of operations, and after the calculation, whatever the result is there, this data I'm pushing back into my Excel. So using
Okay.
the range values properties.
Yes.
Okay, so here we'll wind up with this particular session. Okay,
Okay.
so
Yes.
bye. See you.